Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting, September 17th, 2018 at 6:30. All selectmen are present. First item of business is Brian Ballantyne, the Finance Director, will be giving a preliminary fiscal year 20 budget discussion.
Good evening. We did this last year, a little later in the year, I believe. So this is just a very brief sort of introduction to the budget season. So I'll go through the presentation fairly in a good clip here. We can take one thing at a time. You can see it up there. I think you may have hard copies. If you don't, anyone needs hard copies, I have hard copies too. So right now, I think I said this last year, or we said this last year, we're a weird time because we're closing out 1 year, we're in a year, and we get the next year, which of course is coming up very shortly. So some of this will look familiar from last year, but obviously the fiscal year ended June 30th. The audit is pretty much done. They already left the physical building and they're writing up their reports now, so that shouldn't be too much longer. The auditor will again meet with the board to discuss, his findings and sort of data points that he likes to go over. Free cash is a source of funds for FY20, which is our first talk about the new year coming up. It's good news this time, 218,000. Last year, if you remember, it was bad news. We had lost 250 or 300,000, somewhere around there.
For the viewing public, can you go in just on the definition of free cash? It's not free.
Free cash is never free.
And then you just said we lost something, and I'm sure that the viewing public would like a little bit more on what you meant by loss.
Free cash is basically your balance at the end of the fiscal year, and the balances usually consist of fees and fines and certain permits if they're above our estimates, and any returns from articles. Another big source is balances left in departments. So DPW has a great year and they have 200,000 left in their department, or health insurance sometimes is one that can have a bigger balance. That's your calculation of free cash. So we didn't really so much lose, but the differential from the previous year was $218,000 better for FY20. So that's good news though. And as you can see, I did mention departmental turnbacks, which is a source of free cash. The reserve fund again was used last year in full, and the revenues, our local revenues, after several years of going up a little bit due to motor vehicle excise, some of the Madison Place things and other little things that drove that's kind of leveled out now. So after the annual town meeting, we had 1.8 million in levy capacity. That's a decrease of about 900,000 from last year. Remember, we're dealing with 18, so again, free cash went down. That's a part of the reason why that 900,000 is there. And our capital authorizations went up about 600,000. And our new growth went down just a hair from last year. So those three things are pretty much why that 900,000 got eaten up a little bit. But we still have a healthy 1.8 million. That's also good.
Brian, can I ask on the departmental turnbacks, was that did it really make a huge difference in the free cash, the increase, or was it just kind of typical what you find on a given fiscal year?
No, it was a little bigger this year. It was. There was a few bigger accounts.
Okay.
Some of the bigger departments. One was benefits. There was a couple other larger departments that whatever we did. I mean, that's a good thing.
It is very good thing.
It wasn't spent down; it was returned.
Okay, thank you.
And I think one of the Brian says the big departments. Obviously, health insurance is one, but I think police and fire, excuse me, are two that really can switch the tide one way or the other, depending on how things go for overtime.
Yeah.
So they have fairly healthy overtime accounts to cover for all these incidences. Since the chief is sitting here, I'll give him kudos. But since Ken has been here, Ken has done a great job controlling the overtime. And so obviously, that has helped to, give us a nice base, for our free cash. And if we have a good year, police and fire and overtime, you're going to see our free cash number a little bit higher.
we expect some increases in overtime with the two, the public safety facility project as well as the Main Street project that will start.
So you will not see increases in overtime because those are detail rates. Okay, so those are details. Details are going to be paid for by the contractors that are requesting them. So the state job on Main Street, the state's going to pay, for those overtime, for those details that they're going to request. Public safety facility, there's really no details that's related to those. However, the ones that you had for the utility projects, the water and the gas,
That's right.
those are all part of the cost that is being paid for out of the public safety project.
All right.
Okay?
Thank you.
A question on the details.
Sure.
Do we pay up front and get reimbursed?
Correct.
Are they delinquent at all?
For the most part, I'm going to say no. We're pretty aggressive with that.
We had a
I know
big
one
issue
time we had a
several
problem.
years ago, many years ago now, but no. So Mr. Mattioli and the chief's office works with Dave in my office. Both of them sometimes work with Aldo, and we've been very diligent on that. So we're doing good.
Good, good, thank you.
Just to continue, so these we bring up every year, just our major balances and some of our other funds. Other post-employment has actually a little over 1.5 million now as of today, but as of June 30th, 1,240, which is very good. We keep funding that. Stabilization, same just about as last year. We haven't made really any withdrawals or additions, which is probably a good thing that we don't have to have any withdrawals. Community preservation, a little over 2 million. It's kind of just a snapshot for community preservation because, as you know, daily that balance goes up and down, and it literally changes almost weekly. So, but it's a snapshot of their funds that were available June 30th. So fiscal 19 year to date, which is the year we're in, first quarter revenues similar to 18. I don't have a lot to say about that because the first quarter is probably the worst quarter to look at anyways. It just doesn't have some of your cycles that you capture revenue, so it's not a great, indicator of a big trend. No unexpected issues this year. The biggest thing is we've had a couple of injuries in the public safety areas that we're just managing, and I'm sure the chiefs are doing their best to handle those. 19 capital, the new ambulance, we just got the bill, in fact, so that's on its way, should be here any day. And the other couple of programs that we had for the capital budget are just about done to also for this year, because they have to be spent this year. So there's no risk that won't happen. There's some minor costs for several retirements. That's the only other thing to note. As you unfortunately know, Chief Morris will be leaving, and the Recreation Director, Doreen. So we're going to have a little bit of expense in filling those positions. FY20 scheduled capital requests. It's actually, we haven't reviewed it in depth with the internally yet. We've gotten all the data in. I think you have a copy of it. That should be what we have currently. So everything's there. We just haven't gone through each line item yet. But we usually go through it with the department head, find out a little bit more about it, see if we can, educate ourselves before, so we can educate you. So that is about 600,000 more than last year. And last year, as I mentioned, was about 600,000 more than the previous year. So again, though, that is 600,000 based on initial requests. And usually, at least in the last several years, the capital requests sort of get whittled down a little bit as we can see what's priority, what may be not priority. Sometimes there are things we can do with alternative, alternative methods or other things. So that may come down, so it's not alarming yet. And we'll, Mark and myself and Heidi will take a look at the funding of those items, and I'll mention that a little later too about how that's going to.
Do you have a capital plan for recreation?
We do, and it is in there. So if you see this is actually the summary. The details very detailed, and it's several pages long. But the summary, as you can see, shows the totals at the top with the general fund, appropriations, debt, and possible future debt. So you can kind of see some of our school debt happened to come down pretty dramatically this last year or two, so it kind of offsets some of the public safety debt, which is good. However, it's not going to be enough to offset all of it. So you can kind of see that there's a little bit of ebb and flow here in some of the totals. Obviously, the general fund, again, is your most important point. I put the other funds down below. However, they all come from water revenues or ambulance funds or stuff that's important but not quite, doesn't hit the tax rate. So the top is really where it's at. And you can see finally our MSBA grant from the state of Massachusetts will be ending in the not too distant future, but next year it'll actually go down by more than half. And then the net debt total is what obviously the town's responsible for. So again, you know, there's some discussion about the future of these totals and how we do things. There's some flexibility on the future debt that I haven't really had in-depth discussions with the town administrator yet, because we can, in that proposed general fund debt is the public safety building or other pieces of it. 7 million of it's already gone, or is now up in regular debt. But the remainder of it, the state allows you some flexibility with it on how you can structure financing, and you can push it out a little bit and just be responsible for interest costs. That may be something we look at doing. I don't know yet. Depends on cash flow, depends on how the budgets look as they come in. So we're going to have further discussions about that as we get down the road a month or two.
So Brian, one thing before you go, Mr. Kalenda, just to further answer your question, everything that we are aware of in terms of requests from departments moving out, 5, 10, 15, 20 years is included in here. Where it sits in the fiscal years may be something that we need to continue to discuss because there are things that, given what Mr. Ballantyne just said, this public safety facility, as to when we do our temporary borrowing and when we make that permanent, and the impact that that's going to have on the tax rate, and the, obviously the impact it's going to have on our debt service. We want to try to manage that a little bit, but we're going to have other projects that are going to need to come in, and how do those fit? And when, we've had conversations with advisory, and do you remember the report? I think that that Ms. Cook and Mr. Butler had done at one point. They talked about it at town meeting and said that, we can do a public safety facility, we can do a library, we can do a senior center, we can do a recreation facility. The question was not capacity, the question is affordability. Yes, we could afford it within our levy limit. Yes, we can afford it now, but can the residents afford it? And is it affordable? Does this board want to think that this is all affordable for everybody? So Brian and I are trying to work on those items now to determine where is the best time to try and do an ambulance, where's the best place to try and do, whether it's a turf field, where's the best place to try and put this all together so it works for the departments, but it also works, in terms of the tax rate and the impacts as well.
All right. Thank you.
A question? Council on Aging, nothing for this building?
So that was, I wasn't sure if you had asked me the question, and I gave you a preliminary answer, and I went into Mr. Ballantyne, it may have been you, and he gave me the same answer. That is, we don't want to borrow everything. There are some things that you want to pay cash for. There are things that we want to pay for out of available funds, and that is something that that we're in opinion that we're going to pay that out of available funds and not borrow that.
So will that show up here as a possible?
Facilities.
So if you had the expanded, they don't have the full list of everything that all the departments were asking for?
Right.
Okay, if you had that list, you would see that in facilities. Okay, but this is just to give you a quick snapshot of debt, projects that have been approved, debt that we're carrying, and what the debt could look like if all of these other projects come to fruition. Okay, but that project is considered, it's just not considered for borrowing purposes.
Well, tax impact, would it be better to borrow it than ask for, I'm just asking, I mean, you
It
could
could
work
be,
on it. You
it
don't
could
need
be,
an
it's
answer.
like a borderline one. You don't want to, like the town administrator said, you don't want to borrow everything because there's a cost to borrowing, so it's not just the project cost, there's an added cost.
Right.
Possibly, we might,
I'm just asking the question, but if I'm gonna reduce the impact on the taxpayers, I would think that would be a way to do it.
it could be one way, yes. Yep. Yep. And again, that's probably further conversation.
Right.
We'll have. Yeah, in fact, I think he may have even asked me that question. Someone did, I know that.
Well, it's something that, you know, so at this point, it is considered in the capital
Yeah, it's in
plan.
the-
Okay, as long as
We're not
it's-
looking at it at borrowing, but again, those things could change, it depends, but do you want to pay for something out over 10 or 15 years? You know, there are certain things, you know, certain recreation projects and things that you can only pay out for 15 years, others you can do for 20. Public safety, we can do for 30. Just got to figure out where our spots are to be able to add more debt and where it makes better sense to do things out of available funds.
So the new initiatives, the last couple of years, we've had probably more robust things on this page, but for this year, it's just, and I know that the chief's down here, but there's been some talk of a deputy fire chief, so there'll be more discussion about that, and we'll see if that's something that is, you know, priority, so we need to pursue it. The creation of an energy manager's stipend that is would be under the facilities director if we pursue that for green communities efforts and those type of things. And that's it. There's no other personnel hours at this time, so it's at least that I'm aware of, unless something changes. I'm not aware of anything else. So other notes, this is one of the last slides. Again, we've done 7.7 million for the public safety building. We have 7.7 as a temporary loan right now that is out there. So we've gotten $15 million in cash, in other words, that's being used to fund that facility. And the remainder, as I mentioned, will come later in the year. It may even be the fall of next year that we borrow more money. Not sure, but you'll have your pack of 80 signatures that we're going to sign sometime in spring or summer. I hate those. Again, capital is $596,000. A lot of it is library repairs and improvements. There's also some police cruisers.
Those
Again,
library items were ones left off from last year?
Yes,
Correct.
yes.
That was,
Yes.
yeah.
So I'm hearing that
should be a
that's,
priority.
you took the words out of my mouth. That's risen to a priority, yes. And there's some very small items like we always have. And I can actually send the board the detail on it so you can take a look at the list. Debt obligations could increase by about 132,000. That's net of the school loans going down. So again, that's just like an offset, which is somewhat good that those school loans are being finally paid off. The full levy available for funding with a 10-year estimate, which is about what the advisory requested, will be done a little bit closer to town meeting. Standard new growth is usually anywhere, we usually estimate 300,000 to 400,000. Whoops, the last few years it's coming a bit higher than that, which is good. We try to be a little bit conservative with that amount. As with local revenue and local aid, unfortunately, the local revenue, it just didn't look like it was trending upward anymore. So I think we're going to see that flat for the next several years. That's a little bit unfortunate. So last comment here is, again, you know, I said this probably last year too, but it really is going to be a challenge to mitigate the residential tax impact the next few years, mostly because of the debt. We've got to be very careful with that. So I just want to put that out there. And then the next dates of importance, the budget planning group. It's a little morning meet group that we hope to put together. There is a representative from this board that usually goes. I can't remember who did it last time, but usually one person shows up. It's at 7:30 in the morning, and it's the superintendent, finance team,
Thanks.
you know, Mark, myself, and we kind of just talk about the plans. It's a good chance to hear from the schools what's going on. 'Cause sometimes we don't always hear, like, if there's any issues over there or what their plans are. So that's what that budget planning group is.
And it's also good just to set expectations in terms of
And set
revenues.
expectations.
You know, so here's what we're seeing for the revenues. Here's, you know, as Brian just said, local receipts are looking flat. State revenue has looked flat for a long time. I don't see that changing very much. You know, so people aren't going to come in and say, well, we need this big item. You know, well, obviously that's going to mean we're going to have to cut something on the operational side. How do we want to handle this? So it's an idea, it's a chance just to kind of set the floor a little bit with the schools and understand what they're looking for. It's been a very collaborative process the last 6 budgets. The schools have tried to, for K-8 increase, match the increases that we're seeing on the town side. And then obviously we are beholden to the assessment for Algonquin. But we've been on the right side of the enrollment numbers because Northborough has been carrying a heavier burden of the assessment than we have. So, but we're starting to see a leveling of that a little bit. Hopefully we're finding a number pretty much where we're going to be. So that will help the process a little bit. But again, schools have been very collaborative with the towns for the past 6 budgets, and I don't expect that to change.
Question? So we do not have any school numbers
You do not.
for projects?
We do.
So you do have capital.
They're existing projects?
You do have capital budget items from the school. They do provide a list of that. It is included in the budget book each year. However, those items those are all absorbed inside of the assessment number.
Right.
Okay, if there's anything like a boiler, a roof, things like that they're looking for, you know, we know about that, so that's going to be outside of that assessment number. So, but there's nothing, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's nothing that we're aware of on
And I
that
think they're
horizon
updating
yet.
that. They're working on updating that
Is
too.
there?
Yes.
For the schools, yes. So basically, these dates you've seen before, and we hope to be back to the board probably late next month, somewhere right around there to have a better sense of maybe at least the first blush of the budget, where it stands with the initial requests. I know there'll still be some holes, but it'll be a little bit better time to at least get a sense of what's going on for next year. Right now, we sort of see the capital side, but we don't have any idea on the operational side. Although I don't think there's any big surprises. We'll know at the end of next month. So advisory has met last week and talked about their first round with, they also start with the capital budget and look through it, and I think they're going to gear up in the next month of getting ahead of the ball, and taking on the capital at least at first, and sort of getting that packaged and approved, and so they can get into the budgets pretty quick this year. So that's basically where we stand.
Brian, can I ask, under the permanent borrowing for the public safety building, when is that going to actually hit the taxpayers' bills? And I know we've seen smidges of it probably, but I'm assuming there's going to be a couple big impacts based on when you permanently borrow. Can you just touch briefly on that? Because I get questions on it.
The first 7.7 million
Was
was
it
actually
7.7 or 7.3? I think the first one was 7.3, second one was 7.7.
no 7.3, and then 400,000 for land.
Oh, I'm sorry,
That's
okay.
why.
All right, that's why.
It said 7.3. So that 7.7 is already in the tax rate. It went in this year, the first year. So that's going to roll through.
Yeah?
The next 7.7 could be next year, FY20, this budget season. However, that's where I sort of need to talk to Mark a little more. And we need to figure out if we need to push that off or not. There is an interest payment associated with that in June. It's like $150,000. So that obligation will be due.
Right.
Any other, the next phase of it, the third phase of it, I would probably say won't be next year. It'll probably be 21, fiscal 21. But again, there's some flexibility, maybe 22. somewhere around there. So it's over the course of 2021, 22, next 3 years. That's why I say these 3 years are going to be a little funky with that
Yep.
obligation coming on. So we'll just have to be careful with
Okay.
So
our
the
planning.
second phase is not in this.
Second phase is in the future debt.
Oh.
It is in there, yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? I guess that's a no.
Okay.
Mr. Ballantyne, thank you very,
Thank
very
you.
much. We appreciate it. All the hard work the finance team does.
So Mrs. Brasher will take this up at the end of October? We'll have a, to
Yes.
keep you on schedule, is that what we want to do?
Yeah,
Yes.
so your second meeting in October, if you
Right.
stay to your schedule, will be October 16th.
Yes.
Budgets are due October 21st. So in all likelihood, the reporting back to this board would probably be the first meeting in November,
So
unless we,
Yeah.
unless we did a
Say
special,
no.
unless you did a special meeting.
So why don't we say November?
Okay?
Okay. Early November. Okay, thank you. Under Chairman's report, just a couple quick things. Is it the 21st?
Yes.
On February 21st, the townhouse will be closing at 11:15 so that we can do a appreciation luncheon for the employees. So that's just something to keep on everybody's radar if you're going to have future business at the townhouse as well.
Is it September or February?
I'm sorry, September, did you say February?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Looking outward.
I know, sorry about that. Yes, no, September 21st, a week from this Friday. I'll clarify further, thank you. Also, I wanted to update the board and the public that I attended the planning board workshop that town council gave a week ago. He did one for ZBA, and this past Saturday, there was a workshop for planning board. I think they went very, very well. I think it was very beneficial for both boards. Lots of questions were asked, and then there'll be a joint workshop with planning board, conservation, ZBA, and the building inspector. It was scheduled for the 29th, but it needs to be reset, the date on that, so I'll let the board know when the final meeting for that is. And lastly, as we're all well aware of the tragedies that have befallen Lawrence, Andover, and North Andover in the past week, I just wanted to send a big thank you out. I know the chief is here as well. We had deployed under District 14 statewide task force, Lieutenant Ken Franks, firefighter Nate Kendall, firefighter Owen Bonner, okay, and firefighter Scott Navaroli. They went up to Lawrence. Their primary responsibility was to work with the gas company crew and go to houses and make sure that the gas was turned off and that there were no hazards. Also, firefighter Dana Amendola also responded with District 14 communications vehicle, which responds with the district resources to insert units and communicate with other mutual aid units who operate on different radio frequencies. So a big thank you and a big shout out to them for, for the great work they did in trying to help those that clearly needed some help there. So Chief, if you could forward that, and so the public knows as well that our gratitude is there. So that is all I have under Chairman's report. Mr. Purple.
I don't have anything this evening. Thank you.
All right. Consent agenda. Before we start, is there any items that anyone would like held?
Number 8.
Hold 8? Okay, for discussion.
Only there was a footnote, that's why I don't know if it's been accomplished.
Okay. And I'm going to request we hold number 1, September 5th. Let me just hold the 1.
That's fine. Yep, no, it's fine.
We're just holding September 5th's minutes. So we'll hold number 8 and number 1. Any further holds?
Correction on April 24th minutes and July 17th.
July 17th as well? All right.
Minor corrections.
Okay, so why don't we then go ahead and approve 2 through 7? And then we can come back for discussion on 1 and 8.
Second.
Okay, and we read those. Accept donations totaling $250 for Southborough Youth and Family Services. Accept resignation of Sujal Alakia from Economic Development Committee. I hope I didn't butcher that. I apologize if I did. Accept resignation of Michelle Ann Haran from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and Southborough Housing Opportunity Partnership Committee. Accept resignation of Michael R. Cunningham as Police Department Telecommunications Officer, effective September 21st, 2018. Appoint Robin Williams as full-time Police Department Telecommunications Officer.
Right.
Oh, Robin Richards. I didn't say Richards.
Right.
I said Williams. Okay, sorry. Appoint Robin Richards as full-time Police Department Telecommunications Officer, effective September 22nd, 2018, and approve new town administrator employment agreement. Do we have a second for discussion?
We did.
We did. Okay, I missed that. Okay. Any discussion?
Just want to thank Mr. Purple for his incredible service to our town. Last year in particular was, there's a lot going on, as there is every year, but in particular last year seemed to be a significant amount of work by this board, but led, Mr. Purple led us well on all those initiatives, and just want to publicly thank him, and the town continues to be well served by his service to the town.
Well said.
Thank you.
Also in the same respect, we'd like to thank Michael Cunningham. Chief, if you could forward our appreciation to the job well done for him as well, that would be great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. For discussion,
Take on number 8 first.
yep.
There
That's fine.
was, in my packet anyway, there was a note to the DOS. If approved, please vote contingent upon receipt of valid update of tip certification. Did that happen? Do you know if it was updated, if not?
I
This
did not
motion?
speak with Lori this evening as to whether, before the meeting, as to whether or not that's been updated, but obviously the license will only be valid if we get that, so.
I didn't know if it still needed it. Okay.
So I will update, once that is received, I'll update the board as to whether this will, this is going to happen or not. I fully believe that they will have that done. They've had it all set for the rest.
Okay.
So can we approve number 8 with that
Yes,
contingency?
with that contingency,
Right.
correct.
And I would move that we approve number 8 with that contingency.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Number 1, Mrs. Fanick, which edits were you looking for which minutes?
April 24th,
Okay.
there was no time that the meeting started. We'd have to check with Vanessa. And then on July 17th, Capasso is spelled with a C on page 2. That's it.
So can
I'm
we
sorry,
approve?
Mrs. Fanick, where's Capasso?
The minutes of 7/17,
Right.
Page 2.
Page 2?
in
Last
closing,
paragraph.
paragraph that starts in closing,
Oh, sorry, yep,
C.
yep.
Can we approve those minutes as well as the minutes of presuming that it was that Ms. Hale or someone
As a
determines a normal start time occurred for that meeting, and
Yes.
we can approve
Yep.
those?
And then the only other, the other minutes that were asked to be held was September 5th. We had received some comments from Mr. Litt. On the last page, under public comment, his address was incorrect, and instead of town bylaws, it should have been state bylaws. So those corrections are noted as well. I believe that was it.
So as amended.
So you can prove, yeah, if you want to approve the list as amended.
As amended.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. And lastly, other matters properly before the board, discussion of fire chief search process. Mr. Purple.
Madam Chair, you had in your revised packet, there was a memo from me as to the board, trying to identify from the board how they'd like to proceed with the screening process. now that, we reluctantly decided to accept the chief's decision, and how we want to move forward. I put on the table a couple of options. I think I know how you'd like to do it, but I figured I would give you a couple of options. You can either do it as we have done in the past, which is to set up a screening committee and let that committee then move forward, working with a consultant to handle the advertising, the interviews, and then provide, reduce the number of candidates down, screen them down to an acceptable number of semifinalists or finalists, depending on how the consultant sees fit, to bring them into an assessment center, and then from the assessment center, finalists come before the Board of Selectmen for final interviews, and then a selection is made. That is how we did it in 2013 for Chief Paulus. I think he worked out okay. Or the board could simply say, you know what, we just want to let a consultant run the show. We're going to hire a consultant and we're going to let them do the entire recruitment process, and then, they will do citizen surveys, reach out to the residents, determine, things that they're looking for in a new chief, and you can do it that way, but there is no committee. So it's really up to you. The process, probably, only the consultant, if you have them do everything, it's probably going to be closer to $15,000. If you bring in and have a committee, it's probably 10 or a little bit under, working with the consultant. I think we're going to try to find the funds available somewhere in the current operating budget. If not, we will seek funding from advisory. I think the goal for this board should be to try and have final interviews in front of you sometime in early February, so that you can make a selection. We can enter into contract negotiations and try to get somebody in here around the time of Chief Morrow's anticipated departure. The chief has indicated that he would be happy to stay on, depending on how the search process goes, if need be. I think that's very magnanimous of him. But I think it should be incumbent upon the board to try to get the process done to allow him to do as he's indicated that he would like to do. So if you do choose to go ahead with a committee, I have attached a charge for a fire chief screening committee. I would ask that you, if you do want to do the committee, that you approve the charge this evening and allow us to immediately begin soliciting candidates to bring back to the board for your October 2nd meeting. And then the board can move forward with filling that committee and get them working at the same time. We'll have a scope of services that we can put out for a consultant, and we'll come back to you with a recommendation for that consultant. Again, the procurement law has changed slightly. The limits have been increased, so this is no longer a formal bid for the consultant, simply a solicitation and providing a scope of services that each person has to respond to. So I don't know if you want to talk about the process first, and then if you decide you want to look at a screening committee, we can take a look at the charge.
All right. So personally, I like how the process worked last time. I think the town benefited with the process and how we got Chief Paulus. So I myself think it's always good to have the public involved. So I am in support of a committee and consultant working together. So I guess that's the first question before the board, because if it's consultant only, then the screening committee charge doesn't matter. So, thoughts?
I'm in favor of the screening
Normally do.
committee.
Sorry, Ron.
I said I'm in favor of the screening committee.
Solely?
No,
And
and my question is, if the screening committee is going to pick the consultant, or recommend a consultant to this board to approve, that's what it says. Contracted by the Board of Selectmen. The consultant on the fire chief screening committee?
Well, are you looking at the charge?
I'm looking at the Town of Southborough Fire Chief Screening Committee.
Yes.
right.
I'm looking at that, and then I'm looking at the charge. They work with the consultant
Right, contracted by the Board of Selectmen.
So we would have to approve that.
So you're going to be, right, you're going to be approving, you're hiring the consultant to work with the committee.
And you want this board to appoint 5 members by when?
At your next meeting,
Okay.
October 2nd. If it's going to extend beyond that, I would recommend that you have a special meeting between your October 2nd and your October 16th meeting. I just don't want things to lag, which is going to put us further
Right,
behind the
and
eight
that's
ball.
what I'm getting to the contracted part. Where
Sure.
the Board of Selectmen have to, how much time are they going to need to bring that contract service consultant to the Board of Selectmen for approval?
So, you weren't on the board when we did this in 13, but you're obviously familiar with the process. So,
Right.
there's 5 or 6 firms maybe out there that do this kind of work. It's very, and the Collins Center is one of them. Collins Center is obviously a state entity.
Right.
They will not participate in any bid process. They'll give you a number. You either take it or leave it. So beyond the Collins Center, there's about 5 other firms. It's very easy for us to reach out, provide a scope of services, and get pricing for those services. That's a matter of days to be able to do that and
And so-
understand what they can do.
October 2nd,
Yes,
we should have the names to
yes,
be interviewed.
yes.
October 16th, we meet again. We should be able to have the selection process for the consultant.
No, I think that you should be able to have a recommendation from me on the consultant on October 2nd.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, no,
As long as it's going to be.
I think that part's easier. Hopefully, I'm sure there are people who would like to participate in this process, so hopefully those people will step up fairly quickly and make themselves known so that we can get them in here for October 2nd.
All right, so the town administrator will make the recommendation on the consultant.
Yes, that's correct.
I like it in there.
Okay.
Because then that becomes your responsibility and it loses thing.
Okay.
Okay.
Further comments?
On the number 5, round of interviews, semifinalists to be limited to 5 or the maximum number allowed.
Correct.
That's in the contract.
That will be in the agreement with
Right.
exactly, with the consultant. That's why that wording may look a little
So
squishy.
do we have a maximum number? I think 5 is appropriate. Personally.
I think 5 is appropriate too. I don't think that you should have 5 people before you as finalists. I
Correct.
think you should have no more than 3 for your
Correct.
consideration. But I think that most of the consultants, when they come in and they're going to do an assessment center, their budget numbers are based on X number of candidates. So if it's 4 candidates and we want to add a 5th one, it'll be an additional cost to do that.
So
That type of, so, and again, until we
so
get
we
the
should decide on that number now.
until we get the consultant, I think
Yeah.
that's why the language is as it is, limited to 5, or the maximum number allowed to participate in the assessment center is determined by the consultant, whichever is less.
What is the standard?
Last time was not a great process to look at because we had some candidates who dropped out of the process and added in, I think it would have been 4, if we could have put everybody through that we wanted to. That's why I had the number 5.
Is that a reasonable number?
I
In
think
your
it's
experience?
I think it's a reasonable number.
Right,
I really don't think it should be any more than 5.
I don't need it.
You know,
I don't think it should be any more than 5.
5 for me, anyway.
I agree. Mr.
And
Shannon.
if a consultant can't come up with 5 individuals that is charged to do that, then maybe we have the wrong consultant.
Or we have the wrong candidate pool. So, it goes one way or the other. So,
And the advertising of this, how are we going to advertise this position? I know we're going to do it on the town's website.
We'll do it on the town's website.
Beacon?
We'll probably do it in the, well, it depends on the timing for the printed copy of the Beacon, but we'll do it on the online up at MMA.
Okay. And the Mass Chiefs Association?
We'll
That
do
send
it,
to them,
we'll do
they
it through
have
the
a
Mass
list?
Chiefs. I defer to Chief Morrow a little bit as to, as to how to get the word out that way. My understanding, the word is already traveling. So, I think that people are already aware that there will be an opportunity here.
Do we put it in a local newspaper?
I would put it in the local
I mean,
newspaper.
Boston Globe or whatever people read these days?
You know what, the newspapers have become
I'm
a little
not
bit,
picking
a
it,
little
I'm just
bit,
saying,
no,
I don't know what,
no, I think the Boston Globe is an expensive option that's a little passe. When I was doing job hunting, when I first was
Yeah.
coming out 20 years ago and that and everything and that, yeah, the Boston Globe was where you wanted to be every Sunday, but, there's different options at this point. But I think putting it in the local newspaper, make sure it's out on our Twitter feed, which is picked up
well, we
by.
want to reach a little beyond that.
No, I understand. And I think some of those avenues, and I'll work with the chief on that, we can make sure that we get that out far enough.
Okay. Yeah, you can ask Chief Paulus how we found us, maybe we could,
There you go.
Woonsocket had a pipeline
that's fine.
into Massachusetts.
But,
So, it was a good pipeline. And a lot of good chiefs that have come out of the Woonsocket
Okay.
department.
I'm fine with it. As long
So
as-
my question, so the one thing I do want to check that you didn't touch on is the makeup of the committee. And see if the board is comfortable, I'm recommending, a committee, it's kind of a hard and fast, no more than 5. You don't
Right.
want to make it too cumbersome. The suggestion was 3 residents, 1 department head from the town, and also 1 public safety official from a neighboring community. Should be, a high-ranking officer, if not a fellow chief.
The department head, are you referring to yourself?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I was going
No.
to ask that same question.
No,
Who was
because
the
I-
department head on the last search committee?
It was me, and I really don't think it should be me.
Can-
So
Can it be a non-resident with the town?
it can be a non-resident because we've had this opinion from town council that, ad hoc committees are not bound, statutory committees made up by town meeting are bound to the resident requirement, but the ad hocs are not.
Well, I would strongly recommend the police chief, since there's a partnership in a building, there's a partnership in their duties, and they share a communication officer. I think the relationship has to be positive from the get-go.
I think that's a great suggestion. Chief, would you like to comment on that, seeing as you're here?
Whatever the town needs me for, be happy to serve.
Good answer. Thank you. I actually, Bonnie, think that's a great idea as well. Anyone else on the suggestion of the chief?
Second.
I like that.
There we go. Okay, so we can adjust that, Mr. Purple, to the police chief.
Okay.
And a public safety official, I assume you're talking fire
Yes,
from another community,
yes.
fire chief?
I'd like it to be a chief. I think it's got to be, if
I
it's
think
not
it
a
should
chief,
be.
it's got to be a deputy. It's got to be someone who's high enough
Yes.
ranking to understand the requirements of the position, whether or not the candidate in front of them, has the ability to perform those duties.
Now, can I just ask the chief from a neighboring community, is that a fee attached to that, or
No, it's probably lunch.
lunch? I
Yeah.
like that. Lunch is good.
Yeah, no, it's usually
Okay.
as a courtesy.
Okay.
We had, who is now, I believe, interim chief in Framingham, Trask.
Yes.
Was deputy Trask in Framingham, and that when he sat in on the on Chief Paulus's hiring process and that brought great value to the process. And so it is nice to have people in there that do understand the job, do understand what things they should be asking beyond some of the people who may have other interests. So that we've got to make sure that base is covered.
So we need to take a motion to direct you on this, or?
Well, I think I need a motion for you to approve the charge for the screening
As
committee
amended.
as amended.
Yep,
So you do want to change town department head to the,
police chief.
okay, police chief.
Yeah.
And then Mrs. Faniff asked that the consultant contracted by the Board of Selectmen and recommended by the town administrator, that be amended. And I think
And
that was,
limit the number to,
excuse me?
the max number would be 5. We agreed on the 5.
Yeah, to 5, and the max number is 5 as well.
Okay, so why don't we just limit it to a maximum of?
5.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public comments? None? Great.
Motion to
Motion
adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.